Welcome to our presentation. My name is Dr. Veronica Estrada. I am administrative faculty here at Pacific Oaks College in the Human Development School of Human Development, and this is Dr. Sean Nufer from TCS. Hello. Today we're going to talk about an equation for effective online discussion, which goes technology plus pedagogy plus innovation equals community plus engagement plus learning. So Dr. Nufer and I have been doing some research on incorporating technology and new discussion post formats for our students. And so we're going to tell you about what we're doing. We're going to ask you questions about the traditional discussion post versus showing you also the 4 experimental discussion posts that we've created. And your opinion is very important to our research. Okay, Sean?
Awesome. So we have highlighted the community engagement learning because those are our constructs. Those are the things that we will be measuring. So we're looking specifically, as we're changing anything in education, we want a purpose. We want something to measure that change make a difference. And so our variables that we're looking at are building and effectively building an online community, and then increasing student engagement and enhancing teaching and learning. And I lost my screen over here. Goodness, what happened? Technical issue. I lost presenter view over here. Let me rerun that. All right, I am back. Okay, so I'm going to be boring for just a second, but then the rest of this presentation is going to be completely engaging. Just operationally defining these constructs here, we're looking at building community. We're looking at cultivating personal connections within the class and encouraging evocative interaction between students and also faculty and students, and then providing students with a meaningful presence, both their presence and the instructor presence. And this might mean different things for an on-ground class as opposed to an online class. We don't want to exclude on-ground, that's very important, but we also want to be mindful of the online component in that building a community has to be intentional if you're teaching an online class, because by default, e-learning can be isolating. That doesn't mean that it always is or that it has to be, but that's the situation that we're in, is that we need to be purposeful in how we build communities. And then helping to foster student engagement, we're looking at student engagement in terms of active participation in the class, dialogue, critical thinking, debating, and we're debating scholarly discourse, respectful scholarly discourse, exploring, interacting with the content. Enhancing teaching and learning would be creating an effective scaffold of such to support learning the course materials, and working collaboratively with professors and the students to master the course content. And so those are our goals for this research. Those are the 3 things we're trying to measure, but we also want to be mindful of the WASC core competencies, and this is a unique opportunity for us to specifically align our work with the core competencies. So Veronica is going to talk about that.
Of course. So our WASC core competencies right now, currently what we do is we assess our WASC core competencies in our BA program with our core courses. And so we were thinking, okay, these are great direct measures that we're using with our signature assignments to assess student learning, and go for it. But we were thinking, wouldn't it be great to incorporate these WASC core competencies as indirect measures for formative learning in our discussion posts? So we're thinking, okay, maybe written communication, critical thinking, oral communication. Do I need to cover the WASC core competencies, or you all know them already? I don't want to. So we were thinking that'd be great, because as right now with our traditional setup, want to go to the next slide? These discussion posts are really to track attendance. This is how we track our attendance, right? And so right now, what we notice is that students, they read, they write, and they respond. Not a lot of critical thinking goes on with some of these discussion posts. We've heard faculty say we don't really like these standardized discussion posts. It's really taking away from our academic freedom to engage in critical thinking. And so this is what it looks like now, but we want to show you what the potential we have with these discussion posts and also the potential to assess a WASC core competency using them.
Before we move on, there's a fourth step. In addition to reading, writing, and responding, typically we get a yawn, you know.
According to Sean,
Okay.
and a lot of faculty and students. Okay, go ahead.
Do you want me to go through the
This
steps?
is yours.
This is me. It has my name right there. All right. So first thing we're going to do is instead of a typical discussion, like if we were in an online class, I would expect an initial post from you and from you and from you and from you and from everybody, one initial post, and then responses from each of us. So there would be several dozen responses, maybe even 100 or 2 responses throughout the week. In this assignment, we're actually going to have 6 posts throughout the week. And we're going to divide the class right down the line right here to Team A and Team B. And Team A is going to work collaboratively to create an initial post, and Team B will create a counter post. And so in this example here, we have 2 topics. One is the peripheral route to persuasion and the direct route to persuasion. So this is a consumer marketing class, and the 2 dichotomous concepts that both have virtue and vice, merit to them. But Team A is going to argue that the peripheral route is, that they're going to present arguments supporting that route as the most effective way for marketers and advertisers to reach people. Team B is going to argue that the direct route of persuasion is the most influential and important factor. And if you can see the schedule, so we have 2 teams, we assign their topics, and then we alternate their days. And unfortunately, you can't see the schedule, but the calendar is such for this assignment, and we can work with it, that Team A is going to post on Monday, they're going to present their argument. Team B is going to post on Tuesday, they're going to present their argument. On Wednesday, 24 hours later, Team A is going to post again, and they're going to counter-argue everything that Team B said. And then on Thursday, then Team B is going to present their counter-argument. And then the teams they can present their final arguments. And so you individually are only responsible for 3 posts throughout the week instead of there being dozens, but you're going to be working with other people, and you're going to be debating as well, introducing conflict into the discussion, calculated conflict, scholarly debate. And a modification of this could be, let's give you a few days to prepare and work together. Both teams present their initial post on Wednesday, and then give you the weekend. And on Sunday, you have to present your final argument, which is counter arguments for everything the other team posted and reconfirming your stance. But it's more of a collaborative interaction.
Sean, can I jump in there when you're done?
And here's an example of the schedule.
Go ahead. So what we found out was we're in a digital world, and students don't know how to debate with using written communication. And so some of them feel uncomfortable. They're not doing Bitmojis or the little acronyms. So now they actually have to critically think and debate. And that does make them feel uncomfortable, because some students feel uncomfortable sharing their critical thinking, or they don't know how to do it. Some actually said, I actually have this anxiety because of social media, because that's where they're doing these debates. And so I thought that was really interesting. So what core competency, if you were to do this, would fit into this discussion post from the 3 WASC core competencies, and would it work?
We have written, oral, and critical thinking are the 3.
Which ones?
Written and
Written
critical
and critical
thinking.
thinking. Do you think this would work?
I think critical thinking just comes right out.
Yeah, the comment for people online, critical thinking just jumps right out. Where that's the goal of a traditional discussion. We don't want to say there's no critical thinking happen, but there is a possibility that critical thinking won't happen, and this way it all but guarantees. You can't present a counter argument without critical thinking, or else you're not going to get credit.
All right, wonderful.
There's another step. I mean, this could be a good assignment in itself, but if you want individual people to be accountable, you could introduce a reflection of some sort, a paper, a journal, and just observing. And it's good to take a step back, because you're introducing contention for 7 days, but at the end of the week, everybody's on the same page, and hopefully we're all enlightened, and so we're all on the same team again.
Let me add one more thing too, is that then students start to understand what the WASP core competencies are and how they can tie into maybe a critical reflection paper, like Sean said. And I forgot, I was gonna say one more thing, but it slipped my mind, but keep going.
All right, we're gonna go on. So I'm reintroducing the typical discussion thread where you read a journal article, a chapter or something, you write a response, and you respond to other students. In this case, we're replacing the write your initial post with creating a digital scrapbook using one of my favorite platforms, Padlet. And we're experimenting with this. I did this 2 weeks ago with my class, no, it was last week with my class. The typical discussion is reflect on a store experience that you had, and there are certain prompts. The prompts are, you maybe can't see it, but consider the physical layout of the store, the traffic space, the patterns, the lighting, the presentation and selection of the merchandise and the customer experience that you get. And then typically they would write a post about that. Here are my reflections of this thing. I said, don't do that. Instead, go to the store, take pictures, and create a scrapbook using Padlet and show us your experience, and then annotate. You can put comments in Padlet as well. And then take your Padlet, embed it, and that is your initial post, is a Padlet scrapbook. And I was a little bit nervous, are students going to be able to embed? And in the next session after this one, I'm going to teach you all how to embed like experts. You're going to be just masters of embedding. And so I thought it was really fun, and students really enjoyed it. And I was able to see, I have students who are serving abroad, and so they showcase their military store. I forget the name of it. Somebody's living in Japan as an expat, and so they showed a typical Japanese 7-Eleven type store. Some people chose box stores or local mom and pop stores, and we got to see, and everybody in the class got to experience what they're talking about, as opposed to just reading a whole bunch of responses. And be honest, if you have 18 posts and you're a student, are you really super tempted to read through all of the other 17 posts? But if it's a scrapbook and you can see, and you have videos and selfies and stuff, then it was actually a lot of fun. And I'm being biased as a professor. As a professor, I enjoyed that discussion a lot more. All right, so I got this one too.
Oh, Sean, can you go back real quick with the Padlet? Do you have an example of that? No? It didn't come up.
My class, for
That's
FERPA,
okay.
it's a different institution,
That's okay. So another thing too that we realize is that students that like project-based learning, they love this assignment. They love being creative. Another thing too for the instructors that are here, we don't have enough indirect measures. So if we use discussion posts as a intentional indirect measure to measure these WASP core competencies, which one do you think out of those three would fit with this assignment?
So oral, written,
Critical
critical
thinking.
thinking.
There's also information literacy. Mm-hmm. 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 So again, real quick, to reiterate, students really like project-based learning. They really like using their creativity, being able to relate to students. It didn't feel so heavy as to reading, like what Sean said, 17, 18 discussion posts and trying to figure out what they're going to do, because one thing that I failed to mention about the traditional discussion post is the way that it's set up. It's, okay, who am I going to answer to meet my 2 responses and then be done? It doesn't really foster, I shouldn't say it doesn't really foster, but there's challenges to foster those critical conversations because students are getting judged about how many times they're responding, are they engaging, but are those responses critical or not? Okay, go for it, Sean.
Well, this one's a little bit complicated, and so we do have some suggestions at the end about when to strategically implement these things, and maybe even considering which program. This is complicated, but it's pretty fun, and it masters all 3 core competencies, WASP core competencies, and we'll demonstrate that. So in this scenario, you're going to have the students create a PowerPoint presentation. The presentation is going to have 2 slides to it. On one slide, they're going to compare and contrast 2 different constructs that you're studying. In this case, in the example that's up here, we're comparing and contrasting transformational and servant leadership. And so it's just an informational slide, and they can have images, they can have some text, they can have whatever they want on their slide. We're not judging aesthetics. The second slide is that they're going to take a stance. Once you've compared and contrast, you're going to focus on one and say, this is the preferred method. The instructions are here is which style is more impactful for not-for-profit institutions, organizations. And so then they have to take a stance. And then they're going to get into Canvas Studio, which we learned about earlier today in a different session, and create a screencast. They're going to record the PowerPoint slides. It's just 2 slides. And then they're going to talk over the slides. So they're recording their voice as they're recording PowerPoint. And then that will be their initial post. Their initial post is a video, a 2-minute video. And then all of the initial posts will be that. And then their responses will be also using Studio. And it'll be to record a webcam response, an oral video response. Just like we capped it at 90 seconds. So like we don't need a 7-minute TED Talk response. Just a visual response. And then the third, so that's the third step is responding via webcam. So the PowerPoint isn't the important thing. The PowerPoint can be whatever. It's the voiceover and the video component. Introducing multimedia into the discussion, getting some FaceTime, voice time. And I can tell you, it makes people nervous to be on camera, even if it's closed inside a Canvas course, but you get used to it. And honestly, we're face-to-face all the time, and we make mistakes. You have to clear your throat sometimes because you need water, and that's who you are. You're real, you know.
Can I jump in? So I'm teaching right now the HD 459 online class, and I'm using this, and my students love it. And they've all feel like there's a better, stronger sense of community because they don't see each other. And so they're like, oh my gosh, that's what you look like, and how are you? And I was so surprised that no one emailed me saying, this is a crazy assignment, I don't like it. No, they loved it. And I was so surprised to see that there was like 4, 5, 6 video responses with each other. And so and some people did the video and then they did the, written response, but it worked out really well. And then another thing about this assignment is it tied into the reflection paper that they have to have after that. So it really got them to think about these constructs, these topics, and then it flowed really nicely into their reflection paper. So, yes.
I just have a quick question, sorry. Just real quick, in terms of the length of time, hi. Hola. In terms of the length of time as how much time you give students to do this particular assignment, how many weeks does that encompass?
So this is a discussion post. So what I do with my online class is I meet with them every Monday to discuss the assignments. And the way that online is a little bit different than ground is that we have modules and it's already uploaded from day one. And so my first day of class, I let students know all the different assignments plus the 4 new discussion posts. But on Monday, I have a conversation with them and they get to see, like, if they have any questions about the discussion post, they can ask me then. But they have till Wednesday. But it didn't really take them that long to get this done. Now, the cohort and ground students didn't really like it as much because they see each other so often. So one thing that we have to really take into consideration is modality. Some students did like it on ground. Yes?
So do you find that your online students are like tech savvy? Okay, because we every once in a while we'll get students that really need help.
Well, that's a really good question. Students that self-identify that want to be online students are tech savvy, but students that are registered into online because they couldn't find ground courses are not so tech savvy, are not so open to they have a larger learning curve.
And that's one thing to consider. I'm taking off the research hat and putting on my director of ed tech hat, is that we have to look for tools that accommodate that, and that we don't want them to spend, if they have 3 hours to dedicate to this assignment, 1 hour of that should not be learning a new technology or troubleshooting or anything. We need to identify technologies such that it serves to build the community, to enhance teaching and learning, to engage the students, but it doesn't feel like it's part it has to get out of the way of the teaching and learning. And you consider, like traditionally, there is a lot of dialogue around the blackboard, the presence of a chalkboard in a classroom. They thought that's a horrible idea because you're going to be turning your back to learners and it's going to be distracting. And after a while it worked out and nobody thought about the blackboard, which became a whiteboard, which became a smart board. It just blends into the learning environment. And in online, that's the real purpose of this kind of technology. We can't be so avant-garde that it's like, okay, you have to register for this, then register for this, and then it's going to take you 5 hours just to figure out the tech component. And okay, now start your assignment. It has to get out of the way. It has to be easy enough. And you know, Studio is a new tool for us, but that's my hope. If we can introduce it early enough in the program that it'll be seamless. Do you have a question in the back?
Oh, yes. So group work, just as a rule, tends to bring out the apprehension. A lot of students, they don't like group work at all. So how did you overcome that? If you know of any situations where students were like, I can't do this. And then additionally, how did you evaluate that everybody who was in that group actually participated as an equal member and gave equal, feedback into the discussion post?
I'm going to take question 1, Sean. I'll give you question 2. We try to make sure that the groups are small. When they're small, it's manageable. So anything over 3, students get really nervous. They like to do... Yeah, because our classes are so small. And so one thing that we said in the beginning was like, that debate, if you're talking about the debate, it's really going to be catered on how many students you have in the class. So sometimes our classes are 7, and also students already know each other. So I think it was Judy Kay that said that sometimes student mentioned something that happened in their last class, and you're like, oh wow, they've been taking classes together, so they feel comfortable. So I think the apprehension might happen in their first semester, but if you have smaller groups, it's more manageable than if you put them in a big group over 3, they get stressed out. So this is something that you really have to have, that emotional intelligence when you start working with your students, and to say, okay, with emergent curriculum, you can just modify. Now, do you want to answer question number 2?
I do. I think we need to move on actually, but I won't. If I can table that, Christine, for a moment, just so that we can
finish the presentation.
We have a few more minutes left.
Okay, got it.
This is for you.
Okay, so this is me. So this is another discussion post that we used where we asked students to take a stance. So here we have different variables. So conscientiousness, moral attentiveness, duty orientation. So what we did was we assigned a student a topic, and they have to present their topic. And then we had, in this case, because the class was so small, we had 2 student provocateurs. So these students here had to post their assignment or their answer or describe what it means in terms of like moral attentiveness. What does it mean? And so they have to, in their eyes with the readings, describe that. Then you have a provocateur that comes in and questions them. And so they have to go back and forth, back and forth. And so what we notice is that the provocateur will say, well, I have a really hard time, I don't want to do this. Then they love it. They go in there, and that critical thinking, that debate is amazing. And then they ask, okay, Dr. Estrada, can I reply to somebody else? And I'm like, well, in this case, sure. But Sean, do you want to add anything else with that?
I don't think we have guidelines as well, because we're introducing discourse into. Did you want to talk through these, or do you want me to cover these points there?
Sure. So our guidelines is don't get emotional, because sometimes students get emotional. So it's teaching them to manage their emotions and to really think through their critical thought. Be concise. So make sure you're reading your course material and be concise with your definitions. Support your claim with empirical evidence. We want to see that. And then admit when you're wrong. And then be mindful of arguments, and then be respectful. So far so good. We haven't had any disrespectful discourse. It's actually been really awesome. And I've been online where I'm like, whoa, there's so many responses, more so than I've ever seen in discussion posts. And the level of critical thinking, the level of dialogue has really impressed me, where I feel like I'm the observer. Sometimes teachers have to be the initiator. But in this instance, I felt like I was an observer. I had to catch up with the students because they were just having great discourse.
Awesome. So we're going to close this out. Okay, we'll take a question.
Last question. On the last slide, it said that you're wrong. I was thinking more of the term admit and convinced. So,
Yeah.
something that would put out
The comment was for this where it says admit when you're wrong, admit when you've been convinced. And that's really the point of this. The point of isn't just argue with each other and debate. It's somebody takes a point, somebody makes a counterpoint, and then all of a sudden when those have been presented, we should be in a different place as a class. And then we can present another counterpoint and another counterpoint, and our knowledge, everything's moving. And that's really the purpose. And we said in an earlier session today, like, if this was an institution where we're teaching calculus or trigonometry, like, there might be a right answer and a right way to get that answer, and that's the right answer. And that's not the case in pretty much all the classes that we teach. There isn't one right way of thinking. And so that's the point, and that's the value that we provide. That's our education. We're not just disseminating knowledge and that's our product, because the internet exists, libraries are free, and people can read books. If it's just about acquiring information, it's about the community and how we get to our thinking. So I'm going to wrap this up by going back to the beginning and talking about the WASC core competencies. We have written communication, critical thinking, oral communication. Earlier we asked traditional discussions, which is read, write, and respond. They fit into written communication and critical thinking, and we don't want to replace that. Our goal is not to never have that kind of discussion thread ever again, because it has a place and it aligns with core competencies. But in this way, we can introduce that there are other methods of accomplishing these core competencies, different strategies that might be more engaging, might not. For example, the studio assignment, the feedback that we're getting from students is it's not great for on-ground. It's just more work for them. Creating a video that they see each other's faces every week anyway, and so that might not be redundant. None of these are universal and that you can always apply it. In fact, for critical thinking, we have two. We have the team debate, and we have the designative provocateur that we feel truly enhance the critical thinking. Critical thinking is possible for all of them, but it's impossible not to have critical thinking when you're debating. And then this oral communication previously is untapped, and all of a sudden now we have this multimedia approach. They're creating videos, they're talking through, comparing and contrasting, taking stances, and presenting that to their class. And so all of a sudden, now we have, we're not replacing the traditional discussion, but we're building a repository that we can pick as we're doing course design, as we're coming up with our alignment and our assessments, that we have a lot to choose from if we elaborate on this. And none of these are perfect. We're conducting focus groups regularly with students, online, on ground, having discussions with faculty, and we want to pull you guys in to be a part of this, to really continue refining and brainstorming.
So what's really awesome about this, it works really well with HD, at least within our capstone and our fieldwork, because with fieldwork they have to do a PowerPoint presentation on their fieldwork project, and then with capstone. So what I noticed too is I actually had a ground student that did this because that person didn't want to communicate, didn't want to do a presentation orally in front of people, but actually did one of these, and I allowed her. And it was awesome because she still met her oral communication. So I'm working with her even though she was a ground student. And then students were saying, PowerPoint is a thing of the past. And so we had a lot of ground students that did it was like kind of half and half, that did like this modality because it was a little bit more interesting than the traditional PowerPoint. So questions?
That's where we're at. So any questions?
Thoughts?
Comments? Oh. Yeah, we'll circle back. So how do you measure that people in a group are actually participating? And what I do with my students, so I'm incorporating some of these into industrial organizational psychology and behavioral economics program to courses at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. And I split the people into groups in Canvas. And when you have a group in Canvas, then that group has their own Canvas group, and that they have their own pages, discussion boards, they can post announcements, share documents with each other, and I can monitor that. And for another project, I have a team leader every week. I have a set of assignments that regularly require teamwork, and so each week I send out emails to the team leads and say, okay, you're the team lead, you're responsible for corralling everybody, for submitting the deliverable, and then at the end of the week, I have a checklist for you where you evaluate the people on your team, give me some feedback, and then at the end of the term, I have a participation grade that which is an aggregation of all of the reports that I get back. So essentially, they assign themselves a grade, but I can go into Canvas and I can see their interactions as well, and I can see who's And you can even say if it's a Word document, like track changes, learn how to use track changes, and you can see everybody's participation. And so it's not like there's one answer on how to do that, but there are options if we're concerned about, and I like the peer review approach, like let the students grade themselves, and they're going to take a turn being a team leader, and they're going to be led by somebody, and nobody better to grade participation than themselves, really.
And I want to thank Dr. Terry Webster for supporting us, because it really helps us be creative and elevate our academic rigor, and at the same time provide that energy that we need as academics to do what we do, which is, create and learn and teach.
Thank you, Dr.
So
Webster.
any more questions? All right, thank
All
you.
right, thanks.